The most powerful navy in the history of the world is being bled dry, not by a superpower rival, not by a nuclear submarine, and not by a hypersonic missile, but by a drone that costs less than a laptop, a device so cheap, so disposable, and so easy to produce in massive quantities that it has exposed a vulnerability in American naval doctrine that decades of multi-billion-dollar warship programs never anticipated. Because when a $2.2 billion Arleigh Burke-class destroyer has to fire a $4.3 million missile to destroy a $2,000 drone, that is not a victory, that is a trap, and the United States Navy is walking straight into it. In today's video, we'll break down how the cheapest weapons on the modern battlefield are threatening to bankrupt the most expensive fleet ever assembled, and why the solutions may arrive too late. The crisis has a name in defense circles: the cost-exchange ratio, and until October of 2023, it was largely a theoretical concern, something analysts discussed in white papers and war games. But on October 19th of that year, theory became reality when the USS Kearney, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer stationed in the Red Sea, conducted what would become the most intense sustained surface engagement by a U.S. warship since the Second World War. Over the course of 10 hours, the Kearney intercepted 4 cruise missiles and 15 drones, launched by Houthi rebels in Yemen, using SM-2 Standard missiles that cost $2.1 million each. And the targets they were destroying were Iranian-supplied Samad series drones valued at between $15,000 and $30,000, Shahed 136 variants costing between $20,000 and $50,000, and in some cases modified commercial drones that cost as little as $2,000. The math was catastrophic. And that was just the beginning. Since October 2023, the Houthis have launched over 500 individual strikes against more than 80 ships using a combination of drones, anti-ship ballistic missiles, and unmanned surface vessels. The U.S. Navy's response has consumed over 700 Standard missiles at a total munitions cost exceeding $1.8 billion by late 2024, with 2026 projections approaching $4 billion if current engagement rates persist, and the cost ratio in many of these engagements has been staggering in the most extreme cases, an SM-6 missile costing up to $9.5 million in fiscal year 2024 pricing was used to destroy a drone worth less than the fuel it burned getting to its target. That is a negative cost-exchange ratio of nearly 5,000 to 1. But the expenditure itself isn't even the most frightening part of this equation. It's the inventory problem. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer carries 96 vertical launch system cells, each loaded with a missile that cannot be reloaded at sea. Once those 96 cells are empty, the ship must leave the combat zone and return to a specialized port facility for resupply. A process that takes the warship out of the fight for weeks, and the production pipeline cannot keep pace. The U.S. Navy currently produces roughly 125 SM-6 missiles per year, with plans to ramp to 300 by 2028. But in a high-intensity conflict scenario, a single carrier strike group could theoretically exhaust an entire year's production of SM-6 missiles in less than a week. This is the strategy that defense analysts call depleting the defender, and the Houthis have demonstrated it with textbook precision-launch, cheap sacrificial drones to force the defender to empty their missile magazines, and once the VLS cells are dry, follow up with a faster, more dangerous anti-ship ballistic missile that the now defenseless warship cannot stop. The first ship sunk by a Houthi missile, the MV Rubimar, went down on February 18, 2024. The first fatal strike hit the MV True Confidence on March 6, 2024, killing 3 crew members, and the MV Galaxy Leader was seized via helicopter assault on November 19, 2023, and remains in Houthi custody. The economic impact has been devastating. Suez Canal container ship traffic dropped by 90% in 2024, and by early 2026, traffic remains 60% below pre-crisis levels, as shipping companies reroute around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks and enormous fuel costs to every voyage. Now, it's important to understand that the Houthis did not invent this problem. They merely proved that it works. The intellectual blueprint was laid out more than 2 decades ago, in 2002. The Pentagon conducted a $250 million war game called Millennium Challenge, designed to simulate a conflict with a Middle Eastern adversary. Lieutenant General Paul Van Riper, commanding the opposing Red Team, ignored the scripted scenario and instead used a swarm of small boats, motorcycle couriers for communications, and civilian aircraft to overwhelm the U.S. Navy's Aegis defense system in the opening hours of the simulated conflict. Van Riper's swarm tactics sank 16 major warships, including an aircraft carrier, a result so embarrassing that the exercise was halted and restarted with new rules to ensure the blue team would win. The Houthi Red Sea campaign is essentially the first real-world execution of the Van Riper Doctrine, and the results have validated every concern he raised. Speaking of the drones themselves, the arsenal is remarkably diverse and remarkably cheap. The Samad 3 has a range of 1,500 kilometers, carries an 18-kilogram warhead, and costs approximately $30,000. The Shahed 136, a delta-wing design powered by what Western analysts derisively call a moped engine, has a range of 2,500 kilometers, carries a 40-kilogram warhead, and costs roughly $35,000. It is also designed for swarm operations where dozens can be launched simultaneously on converging flight paths. The Houthi unmanned surface vessels are essentially remote-controlled boat bombs, carrying over 500 kilograms of explosives with a range of 200 kilometers, at a cost of approximately $50,000. And these are the sophisticated variants at the bottom end. Modified commercial drones, costing as little as $500, have been fitted with explosive payloads and GPS guidance, creating weapons that a teenager could assemble from parts ordered online. The broader implications of this crisis extend far beyond the Red Sea and into the Pacific, where the United States is preparing for a potential conflict with China. And the numbers there are even more sobering. China has invested heavily in what military planners call anti-access area denial, or A2AD, a doctrine designed specifically to keep American carrier strike groups at arm's length, using massive quantities of relatively cheap missiles and drones. If the Houthi is a non-state militia operating from one of the poorest countries on Earth, constrain the U.S. Navy's missile inventory. Imagine what the full industrial capacity of the People's Republic of China could do to an American fleet operating within range of thousands of anti-ship ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and autonomous drone swarms. The aircraft carrier, long considered the ultimate expression of American naval power, may be approaching the same inflection point that the battleship reached when torpedo-armed aircraft proved that a 40,000-ton warship could be sunk by a plane that cost a fraction of its value. The Pentagon is not blind to this problem. The Replicator initiative, launched in late 2023, aims to field thousands of cheap disposable autonomous systems by 2025 to 2026 to fight fire with fire swarm against swarm-directed energy weapons like the Helios laser already deployed on the USS Puebla, and high-power microwave systems like the Leonidas from Epirus offer the promise of an infinite magazine with a cost per shot of less than $10. Electronic warfare and jamming systems are being rushed into development to disrupt drone guidance without firing anything at all, and the venerable Phalanx close-in weapon system, a radar-guided rotary cannon mounted on nearly every surface combatant in the fleet, provides a last-ditch defense at a cost per engagement far below that of a standard missile. But each of these solutions is either early in deployment, limited in capability, or years from being available at scale. The uncomfortable truth is that the U.S. Navy is fighting a 21st-century swarm threat with a 20th-century arsenal design that was built to counter Soviet anti-ship missiles, not disposable drones that cost less than a round of drinks at a Manhattan restaurant. And until the fleet can transition from million-dollar-per-shot missile defense to dollar-per-shot directed energy and electronic warfare, every cheap drone that forces the launch of an expensive interceptor is a small but measurable step toward exhausting the arsenal that keeps American warships alive. What do you think is the era of the large surface combatant coming to an end? Or will new technologies like lasers and electronic warfare restore the balance before it's too late? Share your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell for more content like today's. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.